Welcome to U.S. Rugby Happy Hour Live. Interviews with the biggest names in American rugby.
The New England Free Jacks, Major League Rugby champions. One-on-one to score.
Here are your hosts, Bill Baker and that other guy.
Hey everybody, welcome to U.S. Rugby Happy Hour Live. I'm Bill Baker, that's John Fitzpatrick. Today is February 5th, 2025, and I mention that because this is a show we want to do again. We want to do it either later this year, next year, a couple of years down the road, this deal, because we really want to talk about where we are in the preparation stages of preparing for the 2031 Rugby World Cup. And we got a lot to talk about with that, and our guest tonight is Ross Young, the World Rugby GM of U.S. operations from Rugby World Cup 31. So hopefully you can fill us in what's going on. It is pretty early in the process, but hopefully to pull some information at him. Maybe we'll trick him into giving us some details he can't give. Well, we'll see. Yeah. Also, Fitzy, talking about big events, the Rugby World Cup's a big event. There's a little event going on this weekend, and I'm hoping our guest maybe is involved, trying to learn something from it, something called the Super Bowl. Have you heard about that?
No, I've never heard of the Super Bowl. I'm more intrigued about the Puppy Bowl.
Are they doing that? The Puppy Bowl is going on again?
I hope so. Well, of course we're excited
so.
for. I'm not down on the Super Bowl this year. My Commanders fell one game short of it,
right.
So I'm a little sour on it, but that's okay.
I honestly forgot about that. Because to tell you the truth, I don't really care about either team, but it's a spectacle, and we're going to watch it.
Let's
either
go.
way.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I was at the last Super Bowl in New Orleans, and obviously it's a party town. That is a town that knows how to host a Super Bowl. So if that is on the list of cities to host a Rugby World Cup game, maybe we'll find out.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of going to 3 games. I went to one as a fan when I was like 22 years old in Minneapolis. Bills Skins.
That's right, 91-92 season.
92, yeah. That's right. It was a great trip. So, I am disappointed the Bills aren't there, or the Redskins. I actually was hoping for that rematch.
Yeah.
With that said, before we get to our guests, listeners, please like, follow, subscribe to the show, and please leave comments. I love seeing comments out there and they come straight to us when it happens. And also follow us on social media and visit eaglesoverseas.com and rugbymorning.com for more information. And Fitzy, it is time to get on to our guests. And many of you are paying attention to the show this year, we have a brand new feature to this show, and it is we are singing songs. And I don't mean Fitzy and I. We actually have someone else singing songs for us. And to come up with the themes of these songs has been a lot of fun for a jingle writing team. And this one is no different. So I hope our guest is ready for this, because I know I am. Let's turn the sound up. Ready for this? Here we go.
Let's welcome back to the show, former CEO of USA Rugby, now World Rugby, General Manager of U.S. Operations, Rugby World Cup 2031! Please welcome Ross Young.
There you go, baby.
Wow.
Hey, Ross, are you there?
It's like a WWE entrance.
It is. Oh, just checking on the Ross. I don't see a picture from him. Hopefully we'll get a picture from him very soon here. Ross, if you can hear us, don't worry, we'll edit this stuff out later. We're going to take you out of here, and hopefully you can reconnect with us again. Let's try it again. Yeah, we'll get you back out here in a second. But yeah, and this song goes on.
It does. It sounds like Royal Rumble. I have expected Ross to just off the top rope. Hit you with a people's elbow or something.
Oh, I know. We're going to get that ring announcer.
Banging Ross with the chair.
Well, we'll have to play that song for him later. Hopefully we can make it back. Let's fill in some time here as we wait for our guest to join us here in a second. And listeners, this happens sometimes. It's never really anyone's fault. It's just the way the internet goes, the way the live internet goes, and doing shows like this. If we were smarter people, we'd figure out a different way of doing it, but we're not. Well, I'm not. You might be, Fitzy, but I'm not.
I'm the other guy, so I don't even have a name on the show.
Yes, I know it. And without further ado, we'll get him back on the show here. And there is Ross. He's there.
Yeah, not sure what happened there, gents. I could hear and see everything that was going on from your perspective, and then, I mean, probably a prettier just blank picture of me appeared in the middle. So, hopefully you can hear me now.
Yeah,
we can. Thank you. It happens. We were explaining to our listeners. It happens at times. It's nobody's fault. It's live internet. Whatever we can do. Ross, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Listen, great. Truly honoured with the jingle intro. I don't think I've experienced anything like that before, and plenty of razzmatazz. But no, great to be with you guys.
And we do appreciate it. Where are you? Are you in Colorado?
Yeah, back in Colorado. Been, as we'll touch on in a minute, been on the road a fair amount over the last three months or so prior the holiday period, and then just done a bit of a road trip down the West Coast that we can touch on later. So I think my wife's happy. She's not in a part with me or see me very much over these last few.
And so finally someone here to shovel snow in the
Correct.
Well,
Correct.
if you have to explain to World Rugby why you're making a trip to Napa Valley for a venue tour, and you can bring your wife with you. Have to check out the vineyard.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Ross, let's jump into it. The last time we spoke, you were on a show back in May of 2022, nearly 2 years ago, and you were in Dublin, obviously, maybe toasting with a Guinness or two, because World Rugby Council just voted to award hosting duties for the 31 and 33 Rugby World Cups to the U.S. So, take us back to that moment. Let's refresh that day, that week, and describe your emotions. Going into that announcement. It's clearly settled in for you. It's been a while now. You're working away on it. So talk us about those emotions that week, that day.
Yeah, the whole process and build up to it was interesting, because I think it's worth pointing out to the listeners that those awarding stroke placement of World Cups was the first step in a change of structure from World Rugby. I mean, prior to May 22, it was very much a templated bidding phase, and there was obviously all sorts of movement behind the scenes on voting, which candidate would go here or there. And I think, this process, although it was competitive at the start, it finished off in what's much more called a strategic manager dialogue phase, which we won't dwell on too much. But I think the focus on that means it allows for a placement of a World Cup that World Rugby, as an organisation, in line with a number of other international federations, takes more oversight and ownership of the event, instead of placing that flagship event in a territory and handing over the running of it to another entity that reports into it. There's, the idea was that whole decision would form part of, for want of a better terms, a business transformation in World Rugby, whereby that they would separate the organisation, for want of a better phrase, into one arm, which is the much more traditional international federation geared towards governance, compliance, training, education, and the other side being more event-based, revenue-generating, and be more run like an out-and-out business. And that's had its issues over the last 2 years as they've got that set up. But because again, much easier in theory than practice, taking that type of change in your overall strategy and working practices. And now once all that was locked away, I think the big important step for us was to reignite that, re-engage with host cities, and that happened in what we termed a host city summit in Washington DC, the home of the Commanders. Fitzy will be
That's right.
will be glad to hear when we played Scotland last year. So we had a 2-day seminar which we held on the Hill in the Nancy Pelosi rooms. Great event with all the people that had signed up to the commitments to basically give them an update. and then re-engage in more detail with them. So the May 22 was a key moment, but we didn't really get moving and really kickstart things until the middle of last year.
So I just want to talk about the ownership situation with World Rugby. So when the bidding process began, or the search began for a host for the 31-33 Rugby World Cup, was it USA and the union going to World Rugby with the bid, or was it World Rugby saying, we want to have it in North America, in the U.S.?
It started off as a competitive bidding process under the old format. So when we entered into that process, it was, first of all, an expression of interest, and then a first phase of information outlining what we thought the strategy should be in the US. And they did that with a number of other unions that put their hats in the ring. Then the numbers were carved down a fair amount, and then based on those initial submissions by the management team at World Rugby, we were then invited to document in much more detail about capabilities, technical capabilities, type of venues that we would use, structures, etc. So it became almost a hybrid at that stage. But we still had to submit hundreds of pages of documents and signed letters of commitment. Then there was a third phase where World Rugby decided who their preferred candidates were going to be. And then we entered into that more managed dialogue phase before what was, instead of a vote, was more of a ratification by World Rugby Council to place it in the United States. So the difference is previously it went to council with 2, maybe 3 options of who they wanted to host, and they would vote. Maybe one would drop away until you got to a supermajority, and the council were happy with that placement. So that final decision in May was much more of a ratification of the US as a candidate, and it's not even the US as a union. It was the United States as a territory that World Rugby would place the tournament in.
And that ratification, that was unanimous, right? It was, I mean, which I think is a statement. It's a mandate that World Rugby was very serious about its intention of placing the rugby's biggest event in the territory that is the U.S. Even through the managed dialogue, maybe I didn't phrase that the way you did, but was there ever a concern that the bid wouldn't get accepted?
Well, there's always a concern, I think, because again, instead of just awarding the next one, it was all based on the wider strategic plan and the engagement in not just the placement of the World Cup in the US, but what was termed at the time a growth strategy to enable the opportunity to be maximized in the US. So there was always a danger that the council would say, oh, we like the idea, but we maybe want to ponder on it a bit more, or want to understand more about the criteria, and we might award 27, 29 and then just hang fire. So no, hence the relief and the joy and happiness when that wasn't awarded. There's always things that can not go your way, and I think it was quite progressive at the time, not only to sanction, if you like, the change in the structure by council, but to ratify the placement of the tournament in the US. Is getting that across the line was still nerve-wracking for us sitting outside the room, of course, because you're outside the room and wait. It's like the Pope and the white smoke, isn't it? Oh yeah, it's done. Huge relief and a lot of hard work. Even though there was nothing above the line going on, there's been a huge amount of hard work on a number of fronts over this last couple of years to almost get us to the starting line in earnest.
Well, it's a good point to bring up there. It's a decision to submit a bid for the Rugby World Cup just doesn't happen on a whim, right? So I guess it sounds like it's a very long process, even just the decision to go into and say, hey, let's raise our hand for it. So I guess when you were CEO of USA Rugby, was bidding for hosting a Rugby World Cup in talks then, or I guess when did in USA Rugby did the decision to submit a bid become, I guess, more formalized or a green light, so to speak?
I mean, crikey, I'm getting a bit old to go back in my memory banks. I mean, the first thing started with us, like, listen, World Rugby's like any international federation, like any political environment, be it a federal government, you know, you have to do your lobbying and you have to do your back end. So a lot of those discussions started pre and during all the meetings that were held around Japan 2019. I think, you know, the success that was unfolding in front of us with 2019 was a huge benefit for us making the argument around putting a World Cup in new territories. And then, you know, the lobbying and the meetings that took place, one of the first big key steps was there was a council decision in the meetings made around the finals of 2019 to award the next whole 10-year cycle of World Cups to allow to build a strategic plan and open up other key strategic markets. So if the World Cup in 29 had been a flop, I don't think we'd ever got that across the line and we wouldn't have got to the starting line. So I think that opened up the door for, you know, myself and the board at the time to then go through, right, now we've got opportunity, you know, we've got the chance to look at the long game here, because I think, you know, everyone would have agreed that to plonk a World Cup in the US with less than a 4-year building and planning phase wouldn't have maximized the opportunity, and you know, that started the ball rolling. Then we had the expression of interest agreed and accepted, and then, you know, then the real hard yards happened, and we, you know, with a bunch of positive financial resourcing support from even outside of USA Rugby and stakeholders like the MLR and the MLR ownership, you know, all buying into with more than just dollars the concept of how we think it could make it work. You know, the community stakeholders, you know, it was getting everyone engaged from USA Rugby's perspective, from the highs and lows, if you like, of the various different stakeholders in this environment to get behind it making a difference, and, you know, it being the key element of an overall strategic plan for domestically the US and how that sits within the global calendar, that sort of all got integrated into those proposals that were submitted to World Rugby prior to that decision in May 22.
Ross, you did mention the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan, which I'm glad you did, because the Japanese culture was on display. You know, they handled it exactly the way Japan would, and it was extremely fun to watch and fun to hear the stories from the players, media, whoever else who were right in the middle of it, and how great it was. So have it in our territory, you know, in a number of years, and you know, the American sports scene, which is more of an entertainment scene, you know, festivals, you know, we put on big spectacles. This Sunday night, the Super Bowl is going on, you know, and we package these sporting events into entertainment, food, culture, of our own culture. So is there an expectation from the U.S., or more specifically from World Rugby, to raise the bar compared to prior Rugby World Cups?
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's something that, you know, that I've been at pains to talk about from the start, is that a Rugby World Cup could always be a great success in the US. But to your point there is the American sporting public is not going to engage with it unless it's done properly. I mean, it's always, you know, been one of my, or was one of my issues with when I was involved in USA Rugby is, you know, just forget even the sporting marketplace. As a consumer culture in the US, it's sophisticated. You pay for what you get. So, you know, if you think you're going to get Super Bowl NFL experience on a $20 ticket, then nobody's going to buy it because they're just never going to believe they're going to get that value for it. So, if we're going to maximize, and running businesses, and when I was involved with Serevi Rugby and Atavus beforehand, you have to spend money to make money and make it attainable. You have to have a high product level and set expectations on delivery, and that's not been the easiest argument. And those arguments still happen today around the table with World Rugby, and they understand and get that. But some of the wider political elements make it more difficult. We're going to have to spend proper money and resource in the build up and during and in the presentation of the event to maximize the outcomes. If we try and do it on the cheap, we won't hit any of the criteria that's expected to come out the other side.
So let's jump forward. Not jump forward. Jump to the present. You mentioned a bit about site surveys. You had the big summit in D.C. I was in D.C. for that Scotland match, and I ran into Alex McElby, a bunch of other people who attended that function, and they talked how amazing it was and how excited they are about the future. So let's talk about what's going on now. You talked about doing a tour of the West Coast recently, site surveys. So 6 years out, 31. As we understand it, again, surveys have begun. What can you tell us what you're looking for, during these visits, and also, are you able to maybe share some of the sites you visited?
So it's interesting because some sites want to jump off the rooftops and explain they're involved in this process. Others don't. So, I mean, I'd rather stick with regions and stick with some of the major philosophy. Okay. So, yeah, we had a number of commitments and sign-offs. When we spoke a couple of years ago, we had 30-odd cities with 26 venues. That a huge chunk of them being NFL type of venues. So, when we were doing the feasibility studies in the early phases, I think one of the things we wrangled with was that look at the average attendance across the old structure of World Cup, which was 20 teams, 48 games. The average attendance per game for the last few World Cups has been higher than the average attendance game for FIFA across the whole FIFA tournament. There are a lot more games than FIFA. Really? Yeah. But, a lot of that is based on the fact they've been using those soccer venues that are around the 40 to 50 with a few of the 80,000s popped in there. For the knockout stage, the 8 knockout stage games. So the format of the tournament's changed. We're now gone to 6 groups of 4, so 24 teams with a shorter, sharper pool phase, a round of 16. So it means you can regularly stagger games, and you can actually fit it in a shorter window than you can in the old structure, which is better for player welfare and all those things. So, but when you tag it up and you look at venues, and I'm probably explaining what you guys already know, but there are a raft of really fantastic state-of-the-art venues around that 25,000 seater mark. And then there's the odd one here and there, but there's nothing until you hit the 64 to 80 range. So, we wanted to do, we've always said from the start, we want this to be bigger than better than anywhere else. You go back to the soccer analogy, the Soccer World Cup here in 94 still has the highest attendance ever of any World Cup. And even though there's more games now, so they obviously hit some bright spots, used the big stadia, got their pricing strategies right, and promoted the event properly. So, coming back to your point of, if you get the Americans to buy into something, they'll go into things 100%. So I think the process we're in now is going back, reviewing the original material, the signed commitments that everyone made during that phase, make sure they're still willing and able. There are a number of more new venues that have come online since the last. There are potentially another couple of great venues that are very keen to be involved that haven't even been built yet, that may or may not be in and around the Northeast area.
Nope. Okay.
I think I know where one might be.
So, we want to make sure we do our due diligence on on all fronts to get the mix and match of venues right, to get the pricing structure right. So to your point earlier, we want to put on an NFL level experience in an NFL type venue, but we know we're not going to be charging $250 for Chile versus Uruguay. But is the value still there for Chile versus Romania or Spain or whoever it is? Is but if they
Chile's a sore subject around here.
I know that's why because the pain is so severe. But I think if you know you're going to a great event in a great venue with great facilities and a great overall experience, you can still charge the right level of that ticket. And you guys, again, know as well as I do, the reason that the Rugby World Cups are so highly attended is you have these huge numbers of fans coming into the territory that they'll go to every game they can. So that we're probably way down on the unique numbers of spectators in venues against somewhere like a FIFA, but yet we outnumber them in making sure that, a rugby fan comes here for 3 weeks, they're going to want to watch as many games as possible. And if they're within striking distance of 4 games across a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, they will go to all 4 of those games. So I think we've split into basically 6 different road shows. So far we've done Texas, Louisiana, and Florida was the first. We then did the Northeast corridor, and now we've done the whole of the West Coast. And then next week we're sort of doing the Mountain Central area. And the NFL venues that signed up are a key part of those. The desire of a lot of those NFL teams and NFL venues has been mind blowing. The desire of cities, when you look at the GDP and the income that rugby fans bring into an environment because of, their hospitality spends, etc., it hits so many criteria that makes it beneficial. We know there are challenges, that the window is going to remain in and around that September, October period, maybe nudging into November. It has to, and that's because if we were, if we as rugby were to just decide we're going to move the World Cup to, June, July, or wherever we think it's best for America, it almost throws apart 2 domestic seasons for the Northern and Southern Hemisphere, which, as you know, rugby just can't afford to do that in this environment. So, we've had great discussions to date with NFL, with NFL teams about integrating in the right way into structures, bumping in and out rugby games. I think when you look at some of their desires around international exposure for the NFL, you look at something like New Orleans, obviously the big focus this weekend, big French connection. Can you imagine the Saints playing an international game in Stade de France the same weekend that France are playing in, the Superdome? Just, you can make stories for months.
Swapping stadiums. Yeah.
Yeah. Just, and again, early stages, but those conceptually are the things we want to explore properly and get the right level of engagement on, so that, and then again, as you know, with rugby fans, if they can take in a couple of NFL games on that Eastern Seaboard when they're taking, they'll do that as well. So I think we don't want to battle and work against the NFL. We want to work with them. And I think there certainly can be benefits on a number of fronts for all organizations if we get it right, but we've got to take the time and effort to do it properly. And, if we're going to go into a venue as a World Cup, you've got to be in there for a couple of weekends to make it worthwhile. And when you look at bye weeks, away weekends, international fixtures that are currently on with teams, that's not insurmountable to get a window to get in and out of an NFL venue in the right way. But we have to be cohesive. We have to have a partnership approach, and we have to work with all the stakeholders to make sure that happens.
So you mentioned about making it easier for fans to get to their matches they want to go to, 3 in a few weeks, whatever. Is the thought process already there about regionalizing pools? Let's say Pool A in the Northeast Quarter would have the same 4 or 5 teams playing their entire pool, so a South Africa fan doesn't have to fly from New York for one match and then fly to Chicago or LA for the second match. Would that be what you're going for?
Again, it's early days and there's no definitive answer, but yes, in theory, and it may not be exactly in one small region, but keep everyone on, you say for the pool phases on the West Coast or the West Central, and because we want to minimize flying time, and it comes down to player welfare as well. It comes down to be environmentally sustainable. The last thing we need is teams zigzagging across the country and building carbon footprints and taking all those things into account as well. And I think the benefit of the 6 pools of 4 gives us a chance that, because you've only got those 3 pool rounds before you hit a round of 16, it gives you a better chance to be clearer on your logistics and movements with the even number of teams and how the games are going to flow.
Ross, question just on the requirements for the venues for the field for international rugby. We certainly don't make it easy here in the U.S. not being on the metric system. The heck is a yard, but
Meter.
Obviously most of the stadiums, obviously from a capacity wise, are fit the bill. Do most of the outdoor NFL stadiums, college football stadiums, I think the other venues that fit the capacity, do they have the right field dimensions to be able to put on the games?
That's what we're focused on in this first phase. So to come back to where we are today, I think what we want to be clear is we don't waste people's time and effort for exactly that reason. Fitzy is, we're out there with even my sad old ass with one of those trundle wheels trundling around some of those, with measurements, and other people far younger and more inept to me with laser measurement things.
I'm sure there's an app for that,
but well, you can Google measure most of them with you can go to Google Earth, can't you? And there's measuring tools on there. But listen, we want to be clear that we're doing it properly. So that's the initial concentration of these road shows is to do exactly that. And there's been a number of other cities post the success of that July event of we want to be part of it as well, and we want to give everyone the chance. So we're going to be up by the time it's finished over 40 cities that we'll have hit, and we'll have good comparable data on exactly that. And the issue we don't have with some of those venues that have been turned into soccer venues, with it being having a clear window, is FIFA are coming in months ahead and building whole new grass pitches with aeration systems, irrigation systems, sunlight systems to keep the thing alive for 3 months. If we're going to be in and out, I think there's other technology we can utilize which is improving on a year-on-year basis, is that we only want to keep it from dying for 2 weeks, basically, if we're going in there. So capabilities, we want to play on natural grass. We want to ensure, which Rugby World Cup's always been strict on, that, but has never, I don't think there's ever been a tournament that's been played on all 100 metre by 70 metre with 10 metre in goal areas is the ideal rugby pitch. That's never happened in any World Cup I was involved with, and it certainly never happened. So there's always been a couple of options of pitches. So what we want to do during this exercise is look at one, if we can get something to what World Rugby would deem as a minimum, hit the minimum criteria for international rugby, and set some tournament rules that would be a minimum, and then look at a potential bigger template. So the other thing that's always happened in World Cups is not have multiple pitch sizes, almost have 2 variations, one for the slightly smaller venues, one for the slightly bigger venues. And that, and then all the training fields are marked out the same way. So you've got consistency, and you've not got an issue whereby a team are playing on a different pitch size every game they play across the 6-week period.
Ross, the US, there's a few big sporting events coming up here, global sporting events, right? You've got a men's soccer World Cup coming up, the LA Olympics in 28. given that, some of those cities, venues, may be in play. I guess maybe like how closely do you work with like the LA Olympics or FIFA or US Soccer or any of those organizations that are helping put on some of these other big global sporting events to, I don't know, learn or, help in the support and the run up?
It's always nice to have a couple of warm up events for the big one, isn't
it?
The key element. But no, listen, I think, that's the refreshing thing I found having been away from the international scene for a little while, is that everyone's much more open in knowledge exchange and learning from lessons previously. So yes, exactly, that is, we've had various different phone calls. We're due to have a workshop with FIFA just on some of the stuff that they've learned. I think, we as a Rugby World Cup, I think, have always gone into any territories or environments we look at, as I said at the start, with more of a collaborative partnership approach on getting this thing across the line, instead of saying this is the mandatory requirement, this is what you'll adhere to. So, but to your point, it'd be stupid not to learn from some of the lessons and best practices. And certainly when you look at the type of tournament, we're much more similar as a single sport multi-city event to something like that FIFA runs, rather than a multi-sport single city, although there's canoeing in Oklahoma or something in the LA Olympics, isn't there, or wherever. So it's, I'm being facetious, but I think that there are much more synergies in that sort of multi-city single sport type of event. And we'll be taking all the advice, guidance and help that we can from lessons that those guys have learned, for sure.
Now, when World Rugby handles the broadcasting rights of the Rugby World Cup, if I'm correct, is there an effort yet, or will there be an effort to really get the game in front of more non-rugby fans' eyes, say on cable TV, on network maybe? Is there going to be a push? NBC Sports used to have the games on. They don't anymore. Peacock. It's all in different services. You have to pay $8-10 a month to get on. But would there be a collective push to try to get this in front of more eyes?
That's certainly the idea, and World Rugby have also invested a lot as part of this business transformation into Rugby Pass and using that as a streaming service, which is more available globally. I mean, we've got all the geo blocking and other things to put in a hand, but I think how a proper integrated commercial and broadcast strategy. I think as we said the last time we spoke a couple of years ago, USA Rugby, World Rugby are going much more hand in hand around being sort of running joint ventures, if you like, around annual events anyway. Part of the last thing I tried to do before I handed the baton across to Bill Goran was get rid of the conundrum of calendarization that's been going on for a while. So, as we've said, we're now in a situation whereby we had some good, meaningful games last year. This year, we're hosting the PNC finals. So, go for the sublime of the ridiculous that in 2023, the men's Eagles had one game in the US, which is an invitational game against Toulouse, which is just not good enough. And listen, there are a number of criteria for that not happening, or that being the case anyway. But when we've now got 12 or 13 games of international rugby this year, or men's 15s rugby in this year that we can build on, and that's going to be more consistent moving forward. So I think now, everyone talk about, why are we not getting these sponsors? Why, which was the constant question. Well, how can you sell something when you don't know what you're selling for year on year? Well, who are you playing next year? Well, we don't know. World Rugby have not given us the game. We might have a couple of games in July at home, and then we're away in November. We don't play in a regular competition. The ARC got binned after COVID for a number of other reasons. So I think now we've got the PNC as a regular competition. We'll have qualifying games, but we will host alternately between the US and Japan that tournament as it builds value over the next few years. So there's going to be consistency. We've got the Pac-4 with the women that we'll be hosting over the next couple of years. We're going to have inventory, and we can build value. And I think having a coherent broadcast strategy when we know we're hosting those type of events is hugely important. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think as we build towards it, more consistency, more accessibility of games is going to be important.
So I work in sports broadcasting. I do work with TNT Sports out of Atlanta, even though I'm in Boston. But and obviously, they broadcast Premiership in England or in Europe. And I keep asking them, you already have it. Put it on the TV here. I know there's rights issues and everything else still. But for me, I get frustrated over the years because I want to walk into a burger joint with TVs, a bar, whatever else. And I just want to see a random rugby game on. So the guy next to me who's never seen the game will say, wow, that's really cool. What is that? So, I mean, for me personally, I need to see that more. When I go to a New England Free Jacks game, Fitzy, I think when you go to DC games, it's really rewarding when someone next to me has never been to a game and they just take it in, they love it. They see it and they're enjoying it, and you explain it to them. And see that happen more openly would increase that fan base in the country. Now, if they bought tickets to the World Cup, who knows if that would happen, but still growing the game. Anyway, I don't have a question there. I just wanted to say that to you.
No, but I think, it's tiny steps as well. I think, I think you guys will agree, though. I mean, I've been in here 12 years now, and you do bump into those occasions every now and then now that you never used to. I mean, you do come across rugby. Oh, look, it's on, or you're there. So it's certainly better, but as you say, there's an ocean of content out there, and it's still getting drowned a little bit. But I don't think you won't get any disagreements about we need to do more of that type of thing. Yeah. We need to get it more into the mainstream.
All right, a couple more questions for you. Let's address some concerns that others around the world who don't know the U.S. have shared about rugby in the U.S. Clearly, World Rugby feels the U.S. has infrastructure, the fan base, the media interests, sponsorship dollars, yada, yada, yada. What do you say to those who think we're not ready due to maybe the Eagles not competing at the Tier 1 level, lack of domestic rugby fan base? What do you say to those? What do you say to them to convince them that the U.S. is indeed or will indeed be a great host in 31-33?
I think there are a few data factors, and I think one of them is around just that general sporting mentality. We touched on it a little bit earlier there about the success of the FIFA Soccer World Cup in '94, when you could say there were lots of similarities to where soccer was in the US at that point to where rugby is now. I think, everyone will agree that of the potential, and we've certainly seen flashes of it across the men and women 15s and 7s. I think Scott and the guys going undefeated in November is a great sign. I think the joint investment in giving more young American players MLR time with the Anthem Project, which is a joint initiative between the MLR and World Rugby and USA Rugby, is, I think there are factors now that are addressing a number of the issues that we know have been around previously. Having more game time, having more games, so the guys are together more. I think, Scott was pretty brave over the July and November test matches in not calling all the Europeans and giving a wider base of players game time. That there are more players now back playing in the US, and I think there are the younger ones coming through. When you look at the Dom Bissags and the Eric Storties and those guys that are, I mean, when's the last time before Dom and Eric that guys still at college put the Eagles shirt on and played? I mean, there's some great signs there that are going to build towards the capability of the Eagles teams. I mean, even that Scotland game last year, they competed for big chunks of that game against the powerhouse, and I don't think the score was particularly, or I think it was a bit flattering for Scotland in the end. Nobody, we obviously beat Scotland a number of years before in Houston, but I think there are capabilities, but it's all about consistency and it's all about more time to get the squad. I think, when you look back to that Scotland game, I remember speaking at Gary Gold at the time, and we only had 5 MLR teams, and the majority of that team had just come off the back of a long season. Gary was whether they'd be tired or not, that they played too much rugby. But you actually had a cohesiveness because they were all playing together in little units. And then, of course, you had the CKs and everyone off the back of that get, hijacked by European teams and go for more money. So I think there are enough principles being put in place there. I think the MLR, have been through some tough times, but are all trending in the right direction now about having consistency. And I mean, obviously that, you guys from Old Glory and, and what the Free Jacks are doing. I mean, that place in Clancy was pretty much sold out for at least for the second half of the season, almost all of it. I think that we're getting there with regard to the consistency. If you look at some of the base stats around the interest of rugby, the number of travellers for World Cups, the US is always up there in the top 3 of number of travellers that go from the US to World Cups outside of the US. I think, I don't think there's much argument to have when people raise some of those issues around the desire for Americans to absorb top-level sport and sporting events, where rugby's trending, and the ability and profile. You've got the Alona Mara effect that's kicking on. That remember speaking to her just before she went to the UK, and she's actually quite looking forward to getting there and getting away from the spotlight and concentrating and playing rugby. And then she goes there and it just
even bigger.
doesn't really happen either. So everyone's awareness is getting there, and I think but as I said at the start here, we have to be focused on money. We need additional money invested as part of World Rugby's long-term growth plan. And I would say it's like going fishing, isn't it? All the successful fishermen know the right amount of ground bait to put out there before they catch. We're not going to catch anything if we don't lay the foundations or throw the ground bait on there to before we throw our hook properly in the water.
Last question, Ross. Maybe we should ask this sooner, but just shifting over to Rugby World Cup 33. With the women's competition, it's growing in attendance and interest and sponsorship, etc. Is the process, the site surveys for 31? Is it part of also 33? I guess, or similar venues, cities?
Yeah, we're having a focus on 31, just given the time span. But we're talking about 33. We're taking the opportunities to look at a number of other venues for that as well. I mean, and the way women's rugby is trending, we certainly make sure we give them the every opportunity to maximise. You look at some of the ticket sales for this year in England, the opening game, the US England in Sunderland, pretty much sold out. There's, there were people, missed out in the ballot for the final at Twickenham. I mean, you're getting there, and you're getting there. I think with regard to the numbers, so we want to keep all the options open, and I think given where women's sport in general has gone in the US and women's rugby in particular, I'm really excited about the fact the men's tournament's going first, because I think that'll give every opportunity to springboard, give people a taste, and then hit the similar levels of delivery and fan experience around the 33. Get the right balance of venues right. I mean, you look at the success of the Kansas City venue. That's the first stadium dedicated for women's sport and women's soccer. From virtually a zero fan base there, they're pretty much selling that out on a game-to-game basis. Wow. So I think we've got so much exciting stuff to happen in the women's game. We given the time constraints, we want to kick off with 31, but the reason they've both been awarded together is that we always keep that in mind, and we want to continue to build towards that as well. And every city we've spoken to has talked about and continue to express an interest. It's not just about the one. Everyone's interested in both.
Well, let me get one more thing in real quick, and we'll let you go. What's next, Ross? What are the next steps, or perhaps what are the next goals you need to reach?
I think going back to what we said earlier in one of the questions, that is getting these technical capabilities washed out, giving people the opportunity, or giving different venues the opportunity. This is what we're going to need. This is what we've got within your current footprint. to make a rugby, your rugby pitch will work. Are you still in? Are you going to sign up to the next phase of detailed investment? If a rugby field doesn't fit in, could you do the building works to expand the playing enclosure? Are you willing to do that? If they say no, they'll drop out. So that during this year, there'll be a general thinning out, if you like, after this first phase of, here you are, here, we obviously want to continue and get into a more detailed dialogue. You understand the base commitments now, and then, we're looking to have another host city summit probably around the November time, in and around a reasonably large rugby game that may be happening in November to then have that thinned out crew, if you like, and explain the next phases of process of the more detailed venue audits, which, we're doing road shows just now and hitting those and we'll continue to thin that out. And the idea is that by the end of, or, come the World Cup in Australia, that we've at least got our core venues in place. We still want to be open, as we've said, to another couple of the big building projects that are going on, but that we've got the core venues locked in that we know we can deliver a World Cup against, and then enhance it potentially with a couple of other venues a bit later in the process. Well,
I do have a practice facility for you in Atlanta, in case Atlanta's an area. It's a beautiful international size pitch, beautiful grass. Anyway, I'll let you know about that later. It's been great talking to you.
We're going there. That's on roadshow number 5, I think, Atlanta.
Oh. Well, it's my I'm still on the board there in Atlanta White. We have a beautiful pitch just southwest of downtown. It's
with Serevi Rugby years ago when we remember the women's sevens event in Atlanta, and we did a bunch of stuff in that venue with some coaching clinics, etc.
Yeah, the Serevi was on our pitch, I think, with last year or so. He said it was the nicest pitch he's ever been on. So I don't know if he's just being nice, but still. Mr. Ross, thank you, Mr. Ross. Sorry, I just I'm my mind's going everywhere here. But thank you so much for joining us. Great to talk to you again. And like we said earlier in the show, we definitely want to do this again. We want to touch base with you, see where we are later in the year or somewhat.
No, listen, that sounds good. It's always a pleasure to chat to you guys. And again, apologies for my slight tardiness on attendance. But no, it was good to chat, and lots of exciting things, lots of exciting stuff going on. And, certainly as excited about this whole project as ever. And I think it's going to be awesome.
All right, Ross Young, thank you so much. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks, Ross. That's 2 shows in a row. I haven't kicked off the guest too soon. I love it. I'm getting good at this thing. Lots of great information, Fitzy. Yeah. He wasn't able to really point out specific facilities, but I think I wasn't really expecting him to really list them.
Yeah.
You got a general idea. What he said 2 new stadiums. Which ones do you think he was talking about?
Well, he said Northeast, and I think he's including the Mid-Atlantic because the Washington Commanders are going to get a new stadium, and it's going to be where RFK Stadium. Basically, the DC Council was able to get that land that was owned by the federal government back under DC control. So RFK Stadium is going to go down. A brand new stadium is going to go up. It'd probably be mixed retail, commercial, residential, and all that stuff, which, hear this, Bill, could also include an additional venue of a smaller size that more than likely would also play host to Old Glory DC games.
So is he talking about both of those facilities?
Well, the larger one probably, and that probably will be online. That will be online by the 31 World Cup for sure. Well,
I'm excited to see DC the Old Glory could possibly have really a real home, a final home.
Yes,
so that's great.
Yeah.
All right, man, good stuff. Let's play it out with our jingle, and we'll say goodbye to our listeners here. In case you missed it, there it is.
Welcome back to the show, former CEO of USA Rugby.
It's like a Broadway tune.
Now World Rugby, General
Who's
Manager of
HBO
US
boxing
Operations, Rugby World
let's
Cup
get ready to rumble.
2031.
Here goes.
Please welcome Ross Young.
Yes. It's one of my favorites already, man. Yeah. As you can see the highlights now. People just, yeah, you're right. Chairs are being thrown. All right. Every time, man, every guest says, I've never had an intro jingle for me. So there you go. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like, follow, subscribe, and leave comments for this show. You can do it right here on YouTube or Facebook or on the podcast replay of the show, which is released every Thursday after a show. I think everybody have a great night.